Well, for the rhino horn myth is that we came when poaching was going on. We learned about poaching. We learned about why this poaching is happening. As we also read from the Chinese reports, is that rhino horn is used as an aphrodisiac or for some ailments or something like that. The same with the pangolins. Pangolins, they say why the demand is there, because the Chinese will use it to make the medicine for maybe some ailments like gout, like arthritis, like that. But at the moment, we do not have any scientific proof that this one is working.
From Cairo to Cape Town, Lagos to Lamu, 54 nations, one continent, countless perspectives. Hi, I'm Waweru Njoroge. Welcome to Panel 54, a global perspective through an African lens. This is the podcast where we unpack power, policy, people, and the paradoxes that define our time, with nuance, with history, and with deliberate commitment to context. This is not punditry, it's a perspective. It's not a briefing, it's a reframing, and it starts right here. Today we turn to East African conservation at a moment when Africa is losing nearly 4 million hectares of forest every year, according to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. As landscapes shrink, contact between people and wildlife intensifies, and rangers carry more of the risk. Across Kenya's conservancies, human-wildlife conflict continues to rise. Kenya Wildlife Service records more than 20,000 incidents a year, from crop destruction to livestock losses. At the same time, wildlife crime has become more organized. Traffic reports that rhino horns has sold for more than $60,000 a kilo in some markets, which places entire ecosystems under pressure. Our guest, Michael Lenaimado, works directly with rangers, pastoralists, and conservancy teams across these landscapes. He brings a grounded understanding of what protection looks like on the front line. So today we explore what it means to be a ranger in this environment, how communities are coping with conflict, how poaching networks operate across borders, and what future East Africa conservation is building for the next generation. So my question would be, what does the modern ranger conservancy person actually do in their involved day to day?
Okay, thank you very much. First to introduce myself, my name is Michael Lenaimado. I am from Samburu, and I have been a ranger for like 20 to 25 years now.
Okay.
I have had, I've been working as a ranger in different places in the country. I did it in Samburu, up in northern Kenya, in Ilngwesi, up in Laikipia, and then South Rift, that is in Magadi area, Loita Hills, and all those places. But I've only also had an opportunity to work in Meru National Park and Savo East National Park. Yes, so Ranger has become a very important person because they protect our resources, and their work is not as easy as people think. One is that being a ranger, you make many more enemies than friends, because you're protecting the resource that other people would want to benefit from.
Yeah.
So what I say is that behind every living animal in Kenya, a ranger must be behind. So we have two types of rangers. We have the rangers that work for the government and the community rangers. We started calling them community scouts, but now they have graduated, and now they are called community rangers. So these people work in very difficult conditions. One is that some of them may have a salary, they may not have accommodation, they may not have the equipment that they require to perform their duties. Again, the government rangers and the community rangers, the threat is the same, because they are looking after this wildlife, say rhino, elephant, and even the cats. So they face the same type of threats. And the community rangers now have got more challenges, because one, they may know about the ground where they're operating from, the map. They can be able to gather intelligence. They can be able to communicate with locals, and also locals will be able to volunteer information for them that they require for their work. For example, if you go to Samburu now or Masai Land or Laikipia, if a community member sees a wounded animal or a dead animal or a sick animal, they'll report to the community rangers, or they report to them through their channels, maybe through a community member or something like that, or through the leadership of the area. So among the biggest challenges and the differences that the government rangers are equipped, because the government has revenue to train them, to provide them with equipment. Equipment can be weapons, can be uniforms, can be food, can be transport, can be all that. But for the community ranger setups, depends on the area and also the donors that they have in that area. When we started the community ranger system, is that we were only able to raise money only for salary.
Okay.
We didn't have money for food. We didn't have money for the equipment. We didn't even have money for training and all that. So this varies from an area to an area. So the biggest challenges now we have in the field, if I may just go back, we have in the government side, we have like 23 national parks, 28 marine parks, and game reserves and all that. But in community, we have got like 250 community conservancies.
Right.
So, and the enrollment for the rangers now, we have like 5,000 community rangers in the country. I don't know what they have in the government now in KWS. Also, ranger doesn't only mean a ranger that works for KWS or a ranger that works for the community. We also have Kenya Forest Guards. They are also rangers. Marine Park rangers are also part of rangers. We may have the government and also the community rangers. So, the biggest challenge is for the community rangers. Maybe they did not have access to funding or to donors or to something like that. But we are glad to report now that in most of the community conservancies, most of them have got maybe tourist facilities in their conservancies.
Okay.
And in these tourist facilities, the Wagenis will visit and pay conservation fees or whatever type of arrangement they have. And this money will be used to facilitate them in what they are doing. But now the other big challenge is that the community rangers may not have the required training for them to be able to perform their duties. For example, the training that the government rangers have, they may be able to have maybe trainings on safety, on how to handle firearms, on administration and that, maybe anti-poaching patrol techniques and all that, first aid, court proceeding trainings and all that. So that is a point that the community rangers lack, and it's because they do not have funding to do that, and also they may not have the leadership that will be able to provide this for them.
So outside of obviously the glaring point there is, if I was to underline this, is to say resource constraints are one of the things that are hampering. You've done Samburu, you've done Laikipia, Meru National Park, so you know the terrain, as it were. And the reason I'm asking this question is because it's not one size fits all. You've got the flatlands, you've got your mountains, you've got plains, you've got your marshes and bogs and what have you. So what's the differences in terms of the terrains, and also more specifically, actually, the culture and the conflict patterns, right? So you have the culture, you've got conflict patterns. How does that shape how rangers operate on the ground? Because there must be an aspect of culture. Like I said, not one size fits all.
Yes.
So you'd have to say, okay, this culture, this particular group of people would not respond well if I act in a particular way. And also, like I said, you've got different areas to cover and different kind of conflicts, obviously, within these places, these other areas. So that how does that play into how people actually respond?
Okay, I am among the people who started working with the community conservancies first. I'll tell you the first community conservancy we had in Kenya was Olchororewa, which belongs, I think, to the Ntutu family. And then the second conservancy was Ilingwesi up in Laikipia. The third conservancy was in Samburu, a place called Namunyak, where I come from, where I was first employed as its coordinator. One is that it was very difficult to convince the community about starting conservation in their area. One, because there was always suspicion that maybe this is land grabbing, this is ABCD. But what we did was to mobilize the community members, the youth, people with disability, the leadership, and the opinion leaders, and even the church leaders. So we took them for a trip to Olchororewa to see what those people are doing. Funny enough, we have the same elephants at home that are in Mara, that are in Samburu Game Reserve, that are here and there in any protected area. The same buffalo, but there was no arrangement on how the community will be able to benefit from their wildlife. So that is when we started now educating people about wildlife, the importance of wildlife, about tourism and all that. So later on, when they accepted, they sort of set aside an area for the conservancy, and most of the community members will give you the area that they least want to use. They say,
Okay.
Let them have that area.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
mountainous, there isn't water and all that. But after years of doing that, we started getting investors to come and put up hotels. We started employing community rangers, and we started employing. And when there is a facility, obviously the facility will need the driver guides, will need.
So you're creating jobs.
So
You're
that
creating jobs
has
as well.
created jobs. That is point number one. Point number two is that after now the community started benefiting. Now their attitude towards animals changed.
Okay.
And it changed because of the benefits that they started having. One of the benefits is that job employment. And then also through that revenue, they have an arrangement that they have community committees. That these community committees, they may have finance committee, conservation committee, security committee, and all that. So when there is an annual general meeting, now the management will come and say, we have made this amount of money. Where do you want us to use this money? Because it has to come from the community. So
Yes.
others will be sending this money to scholarships.
Okay.
Others will be sending this money to medical services. For example, if they have sick people that cannot be able to pay their bills, they can be able to do that. Development, like maybe water systems, maybe development of schools or a clinic or something like that. So all these things have changed the attitude of the communities towards wildlife conservation.
Which conflict patterns stand out most clearly in the Mara Serengeti ecosystem from your vantage point?
Okay. First, let's understand what this human-wildlife conflict is. One is that we know that the human population is growing. So there is always demand for land for agriculture, and they stay here for a bit of time and then go there. So among the conflicts is that, one, the drivers will always want to show their clients the best. That is one. Two, also the investors would want to come and put up structures, the facilities along
The
along the
path.
route,
Yeah.
the path, so that their clients will have the best. So those are some of the conflicts. And then also overcrowding of vehicles in one point will always frustrate the movement of the animals, because it's not only the wild beasts that will come during the migration. They come with zebras, they come with gazelles and all that. And crocodiles on the other side of the river, that's a natural thing.
It's a buffet for them, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just the drivers that cause conflicts. It's a upcoming infrastructures that are coming into to bring conflicts, because obviously, before you bring up a facility, you have to make sure that environmental impact assessment has been done. So that, is it going to favor this? Is it going to work well with that or not? Is it going to conform with the movement of the wildlife and that? So that is one of the conflicts that we see in the Serengeti Mara ecosystem.
Okay. And how's the coordination between Kenya and Tanzania coming along in terms of now trying to mitigate also the experiences of loss in terms of when you have urgent responses?
Well, the Kenyan government and the Tanzanian government have been working closely together, especially in the protection of the wildlife corridors. I'll give an example, from the Chulus to Tsavo to Mkomasi, from Chulus to the other side, and then also along the, let's say, Magadi area, that's the Shombole area, because of the flamingos in lake. So they work in collaboration with also rangers on the other side, let's say in Ngorongoro or conservation area, Tarangire, all that along the border. So also on Mara and Serengeti is that place called Sand River, such places. So they have been working in collaboration because when the wild beasts are migrating into Kenya, they will alert the other side that it's coming. And also they do what they call joint patrols, between those rangers on the other side and rangers on this side. So those are working out very well. Apart from these challenges that are people putting in, infrastructures on the corridors. So there is really a very big collaboration in trying to protect those corridors.
Okay. Now, on the aspect of loss, I want to look at the other side of the coin, right? Yes, we lose a lot of animals to poachers and things like that. But this still ties into the human-wildlife conflict. And I'm sure you've witnessed this yourself. But if I was to look at one single elephant, which can pretty much wipe out a family's entire crop for that season, and these are reports, again, which we can find in the WWF. The problem here is that compensation claims often take many, many months, sometimes even years, which then leaves the households struggling economically and emotionally as well, I'm sure, because they're relying on these crops to be able to put their children through school and things like that. But then how communities are currently coping with that kind of economic and emotional weight of recurring loss to wildlife now coming in and doing that, destroying crops and things like that?
Up in Samburu and maybe like Kipi and Kajiado and the places that I have worked in, is that is quite a lot of we are not an agricultural sort of ecosystem, but pastoralism. What happens is that in the agricultural area, if an elephant will come to your farm, an elephant will require like 250 kilograms or kgs of grass or vegetation on that. It needs 180 liters of water. So if an elephant invades your farm, it will wipe out the whole thing. Now, the big cats like the leopard, the lion, or even the hyenas, or the wild dogs, those are the most notorious ones. They could wipe out the whole of your
cattle,
and all that. So sometimes there are a lot of retaliatory killings of these animals. So people could spear elephants, people could spear or even poison lays that meat that was eaten by that goat that was eaten by a lion or a wild dogs. So there are those things that come up with that. But now in Amboseli is a program called Big Life.
Okay.
So they had set up a sort of a consolation fund.
Yes.
For if your cow has been killed by a lion, what is the market for the cow? Is it 30,000? I think they pay you that. If it's a donkey, they pay you for that. If it's a goat, they'll take the market price and then they compensate you. So they have been. I think they had some donors who will be able to fund that. That is one.
If my goat is eaten, or my cow is killed, and it's dragged out into the bush,
yes.
How do I verify that it was killed by by one of that's so I can say, okay, fine, Big Life, I've lost ABCD.
Yes.
How do I verify?
Yes.
And not basically try to run a scam?
That is one of the duties of community ranger
Okay.
or the KWS rangers,
Okay.
because they have to come to the field, verify this was killed by a lion, verify this was killed by a leopard or something like that. And then they have forms that they normally fill. Then that one will be forwarded to the compensation committee. If it's a human loss, maybe it has been killed by an elephant, the KWS will come and verify. They have forms that will be filled. And then from there, now the government normally now compensates for the human loss.
Okay.
For agricultural sort of destruction, I think they have the agricultural officer. They bring him on the ground and assess the acreage and all that. So we've got those systems that have been put in place in every county or in every district or in every center. There is the government representation, be it a daktari, be it an agricultural officer, the KWS station, or if it's a forest department. So there are those systems that have been put in place.
So let me ask, so when growing up, obviously we watch cartoons and TV cartoons and things like that, and you'll always see a scarecrow standing in the middle of a crop field. Yeah. So in terms of this particular on-ground, elephants coming in or lions coming to, or leopards, what mitigation strategies have actually genuinely worked? I know some people use sound to get rid of avians and things like that, but where have they actually worked, and where can they be replicated so that we reduce this kind of thing?
I think I remember 4 to 5 methods. One is that scarecrow, especially for crop raiding animals. The other thing is that they have tried to put fences. For example, like Aberdare National Park, most of it is fenced off. So that has reduced the problem. In Amboseli, they have also, in these group ranches, they have fenced off some places that are, I don't know what you call that. The places they use for irrigation and all that, so that the animals do not reach the produce. The other thing is there's pilipili. So another thing is that if you grow them around your farm, the elephants will not go near. The other thing is there are people who are putting up honey hives, beehives.
Yeah.
So if an elephant maybe goes around that area, and maybe a swarm of bees will come to eat, then it will obviously go back. And then there are others who normally put trenches before they as a barrier to their farms. I mean, for things like the cats, like the Maasais, the Samburus, will put up those stony bushes to prevent them. And then other things they are getting into now is that there are organizations that provide lighting.
Okay.
So you could put up a light near your boma, and obviously a hyena will not come into it, a leopard will not come into it. So there are those methods that they have tried to use, and they are working. Okay.
I want to now switch gears to poaching. So we've got the migration, which is one of the big things that we've been seeing, but poaching and organized business, because poaching is actually a business. So according to the UNODC, they rank wildlife trafficking among the top global criminal trades, right? Africa lost more than, how many was it? 100,000 elephants between the year 2007 and 2014, which basically goes to show how coordinated these networks have actually started becoming. And I'll come on to now the sophistication a bit later. But how would you describe the structure and behavior of modern poaching networks operating within this region?
Okay. Let's go to poaching and illegal wildlife trade.
Okay.
There's still very big demand for ivory, for rhino horn, and even other wildlife products. So there is illegal trade, which involves, the killing of an animal in the field, and then by a poacher, and then the poacher will hand over the trophy or the product to a cartel that will eventually take it to a market. So in around 1990s, we had only 16 elephants left in Kenya. Of late now, we have got 35,000 elephants in Kenya.
Okay.
there were so many tremendous efforts put in between the rangers, the government rangers, and now with the community rangers. If you go back, you'll find that 70% of the wildlife normally lives within the protected areas. Outside the protected areas.
Yes.
It's only 25 that lives in there because of, movement, drought, wet seasons, and all that. So you'll find that most of the wildlife will live outside. That is now in the community areas, and that is why there must be collaboration between the government and the communities. So there is an engagement that takes place in there. So what happens is that this wildlife poaching, as I said, it's a poacher, and then the cartel, and then the market. Few years ago, there was rise in elephant poaching, in wildlife products, and all that. But you'll find that it's no longer the normal business as it used to be. It's an organized crime. And more emphasis should be put in the exit points, where the products will go out from. For example, we've got the JKI, we've got the Mombasa port, whereby most of, like the Mombasa port, they have arrested a lot of, traffic of wildlife trophies or products. So if the agencies have, the security agencies have to work in collaboration. For example, the KWS will need to work closely with the Kenya Police, with the you call it KRA, where all these systems, work. And there should be a vetting, very good vetting of the people who are going to be involved in this, because these exit points have been the biggest problem. So the other thing is that the prices for these products have gone up. So everyone, those organized, the cartels will use every means to access the product that they want. For example, they can even use sophisticated efforts. They can use helicopters, they can use ndege, they can use anything. They can even use the systems, to make sure that they have had their product going to the market that they want.
So depending on how you look at it from that perspective, then wouldn't it make more sense, or is there anything in place that would suggest that you make the penalties for poaching a lot stricter? I'm not saying to the point where you get to a death sentence, but they need to make the penalties. I don't know whether there's anything at the moment that's been put together to say, okay, fine, poachers will be remanded for the next 20 years for X amount of elephants killed, or whatever the case, or whichever animal, basically.
I think the government has worked on that. That now I understand for the penalty will be like 20 to 25 years if you're found with maybe a rhino horn or an elephant tusks. So I think that one has also discouraged the people in the field from doing poaching. That is one. The other thing is because there are a lot of eyes now looking, for example, the community, because they are benefiting from this wildlife, so they wouldn't want to see it distracted. So that is the other thing. The other thing, the collaboration between the security agencies. The KWS is working closely with the intelligence, with all that, with the KRA, with the people manning, these exits. And I also understand in some places they are now using the sniffer dogs, at these entry points. Exit points, not entry points. So I think all that is working out positively.
Okay, so that
and
collaboration.
The other thing is, when is it during Obama's time? I think most of the markets also outside have been closed, and there has also been a lot of campaigns into those ends, like China, like all those places that these products used to go to. So most of them have also been discouraged.
I'll come to the aspect of China. So people like KWS and TANAPA, those collaborations would point to the fact that our populations of elephants have managed to jump up to the 35,000 we're seeing right now.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Now, we mentioned sophistication.
Yes.
You mentioned sophistication right now. And you also touched on this aspect that the value of wildlife products has drawn in The prices obviously are the ones that are creating, driving that demand. So now the value of that actual wildlife products has basically now drawn in armed groups now that are using militia-style tactics, like you said, helicopters and what have you. Unfortunately, more than 1,000 rangers, from what I understand, have actually been killed in the last decade, right? And this is according to the International Ranger Federation, the IRF. So what new kinds of risks are rangers on the ground facing when poachers evolve into more militarized and clandestine economies?
Okay, I would like to go back to the IRF report. Just to mention some few things on that. We have, in Kenya, we have the Ranger Association, which I'm the vice chairman of it.
Yes.
So I've been participating in the World Ranger Congresses, which happens every 3 years. And like for 2014, one happened in France. 2019, the other one happened in Nepal. The other one, the 9th one, happened in the US. And the next one in the year 2027 will happen in Peru. We also have what we call World Ranger Day that happens worldwide every year. So that the 1st July is a World Ranger Day. We have made the effort to bring, especially on the World Ranger Day, to bring rangers together from different conservancies, because each area has a different challenge.
Yes.
This is bringing them together, and we share a lot of experiences, the challenges, and all that. And among the reports that we normally do is to do what we call role of rangers. For example, if we've got rangers in conservancy or in parks or in game reserves that maybe lost their life, maybe in a contact fighting poachers, maybe he was killed by a buffalo, maybe he died in an accident while on duty. So normally each area will bring the report of how many rangers died in their area.
Okay.
In Kenya, how many rangers died.
Yeah.
So for the last few years, the biggest
cause of death, or
the biggest number of rangers that have died were in DRC Congo.
Okay.
In some parks also in Asia. So DRC Congo, we've got the rebels who attack ranger camps, destroy, they do poaching and all that, so that they can be able to get funding to support their activities. That is in DRC Congo.
Okay.
In places like India and all that, we've had people being killed by a tiger or something, or an elephant, trampled on by an elephant and all that. So normally we combine all these reports and get the number of people who died while on duty. Now, the other thing just on the same is that these international ranger congresses, we normally look for support to send the rangers from Kenya or from these other countries to attend that, depending on where that is going to happen. So all this will bring rangers together, and you'll find that 600 rangers will come and meet at a conference and share differences and the challenges they have had in their work. In Kenya, yes, we are doing that. Of late, we have also started African Ranger Congress processes, and the first one was done in South Africa. The second one happened in Botswana. The third one happened here in Kenya. We organized, and we had like 29 African countries sending their rangers to Kenya for the conference. We invited the Conservancies, we invited the marine parks, we invited KWS, and we had a third African Ranger Congress. We have shared a lot, from the field, from your experience, from ABCD. And all that normally trickles down is that most of the challenges is that, okay, one, we don't have a standard salary for the community rangers.
Okay.
The other thing is we don't have adequate equipment for to allow them to work in the field. For example, lack of vehicles, lack of uniforms, lack of training.
Okay.
Lack of equipments that are required for all this work. The other main thing is the insurance. If you get, if a ranger from those, communities or that private, if you die in an accident or you're injured or maybe you're trampled upon by an elephant, you don't have an insurance that covers you. But we are lucky enough that recently the Task Trust, which is under Charles, Prince William,
Okay.
is now going to support the community rangers to cover the insurance. But we still have to go to look for funding to do salaries, good salary, do capacity building, training them on the standard, ranger system and all that.
So let me ask a question. In terms of the whole aspect of shared experiences, obviously, it helps us grow and to learn from whatever is going on. And that, in turn, should lend itself to rangers being able to be prepared when dealing with the kind of sophistication that we have with these militia almost type poachers. From your personal experience, how have you ever been caught in any kind of attacks, any conflicts, and how prepared were you, or what was it part of the shared experiences that allowed you to be prepared? But I'd like to know more so about what happened and then how prepared you were, and what the results were. Obviously, you're still here, so obviously it helps.
Yes, in Samburu, I have been in contact with the poachers, and I was working in a rhino unit up in the Matthews Ranges.
Mm-hmm.
So one time, immediately I reported to the station. This was after the rains. Now, everything was relaxed, and the poachers came and killed elephants and rhinos in the Matthews Ranges.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Kitish Rhino Unit. So we were involved in a contact with bandits, poachers that time. In Savo East, we also had the same. And it's normally very difficult that you are fighting with the poachers and you lose one of your men or they lose you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very difficult situation. Yes, I have been involved in contact with poachers, and our men were injured, and also theirs. On the other side, there was also casualties on their side.
So you've been shot at. You've
Yes.
been. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And what I need you to explain to me how. I mean, I know it's. I'm not saying a lot of people see how things are in movies and how people are very heroic. As in, what was going through your mind at the time? Are you thinking, my family, my siblings, whatever the case may be? What when you were being attacked? And I'm sure it's not just the one time.
Yeah.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But what emotions were you going through at the time?
Okay, one, when there is poaching, we know that it's poachers that have come into the area. But we were only targeting a type of poachers because locally there were people did not have illegal firearms, and they also did not know. So the poachers will come and use the local people to show them the drinking points of the animals and where the animals are available. They do not just come and start poaching today. They will come and recce the area. Send the local people to go to buy them foodstuffs. Send the local people to give them the intelligence of the area. Where the rangers, where are they this week, and and all that. So also, when poaching happens, okay, we normally try to prevent it before it happens. But these people know the area as well, so they may use this route because they know the elephants are there. They may use this route because these are drinking points of the rhinos. So you plan. When you plan to do your patrol, where do you want to go this time? Where do you think is the best? What area do you think is vulnerable for you to send your patrol? So that is what it determines, and what you have to brief your people that this is what you expect, just in case we get in contact with the poachers. The other thing is that normally the poachers may ambush you. You are going to that direction, and maybe they see you before, or they hear about you, so they will lay an ambush if they want a fight with you. But you see, most of the time is that they will try to kill the animals and run out of the area because it's also they don't also want to lose their lives. So it happened that we were involved in a contact, and one person was injured. Poachers were killed, to say that. And then the other thing is you as a leader, as a ranger in charge of the rangers, what do you do? One is try to see if you can be able to give first aid to this injured person. Try to evacuate him from that area. And also, what is going to happen is that you do not leave the area because you are not sure whether they have laid another ambush for you. So it's really very dangerous. The other thing is if one of your people have been killed, so it's you now, to do what we call round defense, and then you make sure that this one is available, this one is available. If that one is not available, then what action do you take?
All right.
What you do is you don't continue fighting with them. If they have run out of the area, is for you now to come and mobilize this person. If he can still be rescued, yes, you rescue. If he is not, then you do their procedures that you do. But now what happens is that how do you convince your rangers now that it's still safe for them to work as rangers?
Yeah.
What benefit will this be to you and your family? And that is why we are really emphasizing on, insurance, better training, better salaries because of that. In these other setups is that it's only you who is known that you're a ranger, but nobody knows about your family.
Yeah.
What is going to happen to your family?
Exactly.
And that's why in the IRF, we had what we call the Chitwan Declaration. This was in Nepal, 2019, that we are trying to address all those problems. And with the ARF have been sort of fundraising to support the families of the people who died on line of duty. Okay. Be it through bandits or accident or animal has killed you or something like that. So sometimes they have other families that have benefited, they come and put up a roof for you, a house for you, or even educate your children.
Okay. I want to switch gears now and look at the aspect of mentality, cultures, and things like that, but more so to the aspect of myths. I'd say myths, markets, and beliefs, because they all are very much intertwined. Pangolins,
scales?
Armed, but they're armed. What is the? It's not the spiny anteater. It looks like a spiny armed.
Yeah, there's
okay. So the pangolin, yeah.
And then there's an anteater. It's a different animal.
No, but I'm saying they have the same kind of posture. Okay, but anyway, so pangolins is one thing, right? They probably remain the most trafficked mammals on Earth. Again, this is a report from UNODC. Demand is driven by beliefs, which we talked about, with absolutely no scientific basis, but with a lot of market influence, right? So why does the virility myth around rhino horns or the Keterin, that is found in rhino horns and found in pangolin scales, why does that persist? Why does that myth persist? And who benefits most from it?
Well, for the rhino horn myth is that we came when poaching was going on. We learned about poaching. We learned about why this poaching is happening. As we also read from the Chinese reports is that rhino horn is used as an aphrodisiac or for some ailments or something like that. The same with the pangolins. Pangolins, they say, why the demand is there? Because the Chinese will use it to make the medicine for maybe some ailments like gout, like arthritis, like that. But at the moment, we do not have any scientific proof that this one is working. But before that, we'll still lose pangolins, we'll still lose rhinos for that purpose.
So then let me ask a question then.
Because for a rhino horn, it just hangs here.
Yeah.
It's not really deep rooted into the bone. It's something that you can cut. Just like when you can be able to cut your
fingernails. I was going to say,
I mean your nails.
But there's no traffickers for human toenails and fingernails.
No.
Sorry, I don't. I mean, that's that aspect of myth and beliefs. So do traffickers actually then deliberately exploit these myths? to say, you've said there's absolutely no scientific proof at all, yet there is still trafficking. So the aspect of, do they actually exploit these myths? I don't know whether it's a point of ignorance or anything like that. And what message would you yourself send directly to the buyers who keep the markets alive?
Is that those myths are not true. One, traditionally, we use herbs for ailments. We've got for stomach problems, for high blood pressure, gout, and arthritis. We use herbs at home, and even for malaria, and even for any type of ailment. And in this world, how many people have arthritis or these ailments? It's a very big number of people. But we do not have rhinos that will be able to support that.
No.
We do not even have pangolins that will be able to support that if we are to use them for medical purposes. So the message is, let the world explore ways of getting the medicinal products for the ailments that exist. The world is not the world is not. I mean, the earth is not growing, but the population is growing, and the wildlife is decreasing because of these external pressures, be it poaching, be it land fragmentation, infrastructure, and all that.
So the competition for resources, basically.
Yes.
Okay. So now, if I was to look at, in every conversation, and conservation and wildlife is not any different, there's always going to be an aspect of politics, especially politics.
Yes.
And I'm looking at politics in the corridors, basically. Now, according to the AWF, more than 70% of East Africa's historic wildlife corridors have been narrowed or blocked. These pressures shape both Kenya's community, obviously, the community's conservancy, the models for conservancy here in Kenya, and also in Tanzania, right? And how they drive this kind of approach. So what stands out most to you as the most important similarities and differences between the Kenya-Tanzania conservation models?
One is that, political and legal challenges are one of the main challenges for conservation in Kenya and Tanzania. Because land, things related to land ownership. Who does this area belong to? Does it belong to the government? Does it belong to the community? Does it belong to an investor or something like that? So also the jurisdiction where this activity happens. And maybe the law enforcement. So some of the solutions that we can be able to do is one is that, like Masai Mara and Serengeti. It's a Masai here and a Masai there. So the wildlife have no boundaries, but people have.
Yes.
So the thing is that we should be able to engage both communities, engage the government, so that we are able to do maybe something like joint anti-poaching patrols between the rangers there and the rangers here. That is one way. The other way is engaging the communities in two places. For example, in a place called Magadi, Shombole, and all that, normally during the dry season, the Maasais will drive their livestock to Tanzania. And when we do not also have rain on the other side and we have rains on this, they can access the grazing fields. So we should all work in collaboration with that, so that we can be able. So the government side and the government side of Kenya, they should be able to support the community so that those wildlife corridors are not blocked, so that they can be able. There is free movement of wildlife in those places. Also in the joint anti-poaching measures is that at the moment, there is a lot of technology that is being used, like the use of drones, the use of maybe they call it smart systems and all that.
Try to track us on collars and things like that.
Yeah, collaring of the animal. So if that information could also be shared, because the challenge now we have around the Amboseli area, the big matriarch elephants will go into Tanzania, and Tanzania, they do sport hunting, and if there is an investor or a rich man who would want to shoot this matriarch, so that matriarch will not come back to Kenya, and maybe it is the one that was the big of that family, or the one that has brought up the whole of that elephant family. So there should be collaboration. For example, now when the livestock, when the livestock will go into Tanzania, normally there has been from through movement that is allowed. But I don't know, change of the administration may not work as the same as the other one has been working. The other thing is there has to be a lot of environmental education. Because like now you go to Samburu and Laikipia, people have benefited from conservation. So that is why I said they take it as a second cow. So the public should be educated on wildlife, their movement, their migration patterns, and also, the wildlife have also to buy their way. They have to benefit from that in order for them to be able to appreciate. Also, wildlife corridors. People should be taught that this is a wildlife corridor, so you should not go and do your farming there. You should not go and put up your settlement there, because you are going to be in conflict with this animal.
Okay. As we bring this home, there's a few things I want to pick up a bit later, but for now, let's just look at the future of East African conservation. Africa, as everybody talks about, is the youngest continent, yet less than 5% of conservation jobs go to youth. This is according to the Africa Union. At the same time, climate volatility is reshaping ecosystems and the demands placed on rangers. Right? So my question is, if you had to identify 3 urgent policy priorities for East African conservation, what would they be?
One is collaboration. Okay, one is cross-border wildlife migration corridors. Is that all these countries, Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Uganda, must legally secure the migratory corridors. For example, it's working in Kenya, in Amboseli, and on the other side of Tanzania.
Okay.
They work in collaboration and they share information. So this should be clear that these are migration routes. The other thing is unified anti-poaching and intelligent cooperation. We share information on poaching, on environmental destruction, on anything like that. The third one should be the regional livestock grazing grounds, for example, during the drought seasons. So there should be that that agreement that now, for example, people in Samburu have been going almost up to Somalia or Ethiopia borders looking for grass. So they have an express way of doing that. In Tanzania and Kenya, it should not be a very big problem, because the Maasais here are the same Maasais there. On the other side, their culture is the same, language is the same, way of life is the same. So those systems must work.
Okay. So as you look ahead, what gives you hope and what keeps you a bit concerned about conservation as a profession and a livelihood for the next generation? I know there's not many people who teach. Most people want to become doctors, lawyers, and what have you. I don't know anybody who said, "Oh, we're teaching a course on being a ranger in school." So what does the future hold?
I think I'll give an example of Samburu. Most of the conservancies now are the biggest employers of the youth, because they are employed as rangers. They employed us. So this tourism, this conservation has brought tourism. So this tourism is employing a lot of youth. It's all even employing Kinamama because they have got projects that they undertake in a conservancy. So for us, it is the biggest employer now than the people who are employed by the government.
Okay.
That is one.
Mm-hmm.
Two, we should embrace conservation because we come from a pastoral area, a very dry land, semi-arid area. So we do not look at doing farming because it's not going to favor the situation there. So this keeping of livestock, we can combine it with conservation of wildlife and environment. That is the thing that is going to give us a livelihood.
Okay. Any personal note that you'd want to now say, okay, fine, with regards to invite people to the best places that they should be able to see particular animals. Laikipia has black panthers, don't they?
Yeah.
How many? Just the one black panther? Because that's one I would want to go and see. And the thing is, and the animal orphanage here is obviously looking after animals that have been injured, but we're also looking at commercial. I mean, if people were to say we want to go and see, it would be natural to see the black panther in the wild. But what happens when you then start saying, oh, because it's bringing tourism and it's bringing money, we're going to then captively breed black panthers? In the wild, it's not possible. But if you do a captive breeding, that's where I'm looking at, because I would love to see a black panther. But if I'm going to have to spend 4 hours out in the driving and I'm not advocating for it, but there's a likelihood people say, okay, captive breeding, you want to come and see a black panther, come to Laikipia and you can see it in the cage there.
Let me tell you, is that Kenya is a very blessed country. One, each area is unique on its own. For example, Masai Mara and Serengeti is unique because of the migration. You come to northern Kenya, above the equator is where we live. And this place has special animals that are not found in other places. For example, you'll see the gravy zebra. We are having the biggest number of the gravy zebra in the whole world. You will see the the Somali ostrich. You will see the reticulated giraffe. We've got 3 types of giraffes in Kenya. Masai giraffe, reticulated giraffe, and Rothschild giraffe. Yeah. We've got... like the Bisa oryx. It's only existing on that part of the world. And then now we've got the black panther in Laikipia. That is also unique in that area. You go to Mount Kenya, they have the bongo.
Yes.
So each area is special on its own. So what would have been good for us to do is to diversify activities in tourism.
Okay.
For example, Masai Mara has been
standard,
all the time, servos and all that. So now opening up the northern corridor, the northern part of Kenya for tourism will really work. Because in tourism, we've got different tourists that will come to there. There are those who will come and see the sceneries. There are those who will come and see birding. There are those who will come and see wildlife seeing. Others will just want to change their way, come to see a different part of the world. So we've got the opportunity. If we have,
what are we doing in terms of getting Tanzanians, Kenyans, Ugandans, whatever the case may be, to say, listen, I don't want to sit on my TV and watch it. I want to actually go out to Laikipia. Like I'm saying, I want to go to Laikipia and see a black leopard.
Now, one is that we have to improve in our infrastructure. We have to make those destinations reachable.
Okay.
That is one. Two, we have to do a lot of marketing. Kenya is getting a lot of money from, generating a lot of money from tourism. So we should also use that to market the country. We also have to develop what we call domestic tourism. We do not only want to rely on those places. Remember the challenge we had when we had COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and a place like Egypt, a place like France, a place like even places in the US, some parks are even getting more than 2 million visitors in a year. Maybe the whole country here, maybe we are getting about maybe 1 million or even less. So we should be able to develop infrastructure, do a lot of aggressive marketing, and do not underestimate local tourism. For example, we have a place now, it's called Ololokwi Mountain or Sapashi, on the way to Marsabit.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very big flat-topped hill. It's becoming very famous. We've seen people, even Nairobi, the youth, hiring vehicles to come and take a picture of there. They go and see the Samburus there, just do their tourism there. So we should also be encouraging. Let's not reserve all these things for other people, but also for us.
Okay. Michael, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here. Hope to see you soon. I think there's a lot of more of this conversation we need to unpack, but for now, that's all the time we have. But again, thank you so much and for the enlightening aspect and for taking the time to join us.
Thank you, and you're very welcome.
So this conversation reminds us that conservation in East Africa is not a distant wilderness story. It is a daily negotiation between people, land and wildlife. We have heard how rangers stand in that gap, how communities carry the cost of conflict, and how poaching networks and land pressures are testing the limits of the systems meant to protect these landscapes. The choice is not between people and animals, it's between short-term gains and long-term survival, between unmanaged exploitation and shared stewardship. Michael's work shows that when communities are respected, rangers are supported, and policies match reality on the ground, conservation can still be a story of possibility, not just loss. The question is whether East Africa will act in time to secure the future. You've been listening to Panel 54, where we rethink the world one African perspective at a time. If this episode made you pause, reflect, or reframe, share it, start a conversation, and tag us in. Find us on our social media handle at Panel54Pod, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and remember, keep the lens clear.